She graduated with honors, 4 years of college, a business degree, Dean's List 3 semesters. She did everything right. She graduated into $41,000 in student loan debt. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city because the big cities were simply not possible. Her rent takes up 38% of her take-home pay. She's been applying for full-time roles for 7 months. The job market she graduated into has 32% fewer job postings than it did when ChatGPT launched 3 years ago. She eats most of her meals at home. She hasn't been on a vacation. She checks her bank account the way older generations checked their pulse, constantly, anxiously, hoping the number isn't as bad as it feels. She is 23 years old, and she is completely, thoroughly, financially exhausted. And here is what she, and tens of millions of people her age, need someone to say out loud. It is not her fault. Because the data doesn't lie. And in 2025, financial insecurity among Gen Z didn't just creep up. According to Deloitte's global survey of 23,000 workers, it jumped from 30% to 48% in a single year, a 60% increase in financial stress in 12 months. This video is about why that happened, not the surface-level explanation, the real one, the structural one, the one that nobody in a suit on a panel wants to say clearly. Because Gen Z isn't financially exhausted because they're lazy or reckless or spend too much on avocado toast. They're exhausted because they entered adulthood at the exact moment the old rules stopped working and nobody changed the script. Let's get into it. Every generation gets handed a set of instructions. For baby boomers, the instructions said, graduate high school, get a job, buy a house, retire with a pension. For millennials, the instructions were updated. Go to college, get a degree, climb the career ladder, buy a house in your 30s. For Gen Z, born between 1997 and 2012, now aged 13 to 28, the instructions haven't just become harder to follow. They've become something that borders on impossible for millions of Americans. And here's what makes this generation's situation uniquely painful. They did follow the instructions. Gen Z is the most educated generation in American history. They started saving for retirement earlier than any previous generation. They're more financially literate, more frugal, and more economically aware than their predecessors were at the same age. And they are still losing. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what the numbers show, why that happened, who profits from the system that produced it, and most importantly, what the Gen Z members who are actually getting ahead are doing differently. Because there is hope in this story, just not where the old playbook said to look. To understand why Gen Z is financially exhausted, you need to understand when they showed up. Gen Z started entering the workforce and adulthood right around 2019, and then within months, the global economy collapsed in a pandemic. They watched their early career opportunities evaporate overnight. Internships canceled, entry-level jobs frozen, summer jobs are gone. Many graduated into a labor market that was either locked down or rebuilding in ways that didn't prioritize the youngest, least experienced workers. Then came something even more disorienting. The economy roared back. Job postings surged, companies were hiring like crazy, and for a brief window, 2021 into 2022, things looked like they might actually work out for the youngest workers. Then inflation hit. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates aggressively. Tech companies began mass layoffs, and AI arrived, quietly at first, then everywhere, changing which jobs even existed. Gen Z didn't get a stable 5-year runway into adulthood. They got a global pandemic, a fake recovery, a cost of living explosion, and an AI-driven job market disruption, all before most of them turned 25. Harvard's youth poll from late 2025 found that 43% of young Americans say they are struggling or have only limited financial security. Nearly half, not because of personal failure, because of extraordinary structural timing. Let's follow a dollar. The average Gen Z college graduate enters the workforce with $37,000 in student loan debt. That's not a worst-case scenario, that's the average. Many carry significantly more. But here's what makes it different from what older generations faced. According to Newsweek data, Gen Z now carries an average of $94,000 in total personal debt, a number that surpasses millennials at $60,000 and Gen X at $53,000. That $94,000 includes student loans, credit card balances, auto loans, and increasingly buy now, pay later arrangements that many young Americans use just to cover basic monthly expenses. Now add housing. The median home price in America in 2026 is over $403,000, according to the National Association of Realtors. The average wage for a recent college graduate is somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 a year. At a mortgage rate hovering near 7%, buying that median home would require spending more than a third of your monthly gross income just on the mortgage payment. That's before taxes, before utilities, before food, before the student loan bill. The income needed to comfortably afford a median-priced American home has jumped 70% in just 6 years, from $67,000 in 2019 to $114,000 in 2025. And the result? Gen Z makes up just 3% of all homebuyers in America right now. The average age of a first-time homebuyer has climbed to 38 years old, up from 29 in 1980. The American dream didn't disappear, it just got delayed by a decade, and for many, may never arrive at all. Here's where we need to talk about something most financial content doesn't address directly. Gen Z's financial exhaustion isn't random. There are structural forces in the American economy that actively extract money from young people, and they are very good at it. Force 1, the education debt conveyor belt. Young Americans are told from childhood that college is the path to a good life. The cost of that belief? Total U.S. student loan debt has grown 282% over the last 20 years, reaching $1.838 trillion. The average borrower takes 18.5 years to fully pay off their student loans. That's not a bridge loan into a better life. That's a tax on the decision to try. Force 2, the rent trap. With home ownership increasingly out of reach, Gen Z rents, and the rental market has noticed. About 67% of Gen Z adults report struggling to cover housing costs, the highest of any generation, higher than millennials, Gen X, or boomers. Single Gen Z renters often spend 30 to 40% of their income on rent alone. Every dollar spent on rent is a dollar not building equity, not compounding in an investment account, not becoming future wealth. Force 3. The AI hiring freeze. This one is new, and it's accelerating. Since ChatGPT launched in 2022, U.S. job postings have dropped nearly 32%. The entry-level positions that used to be the on-ramp to a career, the analyst jobs, the coordinator roles, the junior developer positions, are quietly disappearing. Not through layoffs, through companies just not replacing them. ServiceNow CEO Bill McDermott warned in March 2026 that graduate unemployment could hit 30% within the next 2 years because of AI agents. The jobs Gen Z was told to study for are the jobs AI is learning to do fastest. Every single one of these forces is structural. None of them is Gen Z's fault. All of them hit Gen Z hardest because of when they arrived. There's one more layer to this that doesn't show up in any economic report, and it might be the most important. Financial exhaustion isn't just about money. It is about what happens to a person's belief system when they do everything right and still fall behind. 86% of Gen Z report being stressed about their financial situation. 86%. That's not an occasional worry. That's a generation living with chronic financial anxiety as their baseline emotional state. Bank of America data from 2025 shows Gen Z spends nearly twice as much as they have in savings, with an average spending to savings ratio of 1.93. They aren't spending recklessly, they simply don't have enough income above their cost of living to build a meaningful buffer. Nearly half of Gen Z adults are either struggling to meet basic needs or living paycheck to paycheck, per Horowitz Research's 2026 study. And 84% are concerned about the economy, more than any other generation. And then there's something called financial avoidance. When financial stress becomes overwhelming, a significant number of young Americans just stop looking. They stop checking accounts, stop opening statements, stop engaging with their finances entirely, because the anxiety of knowing feels worse than not knowing. That avoidance isn't a weakness, it is the predictable psychological response to being told you're failing a test that was rigged before you sat down. Let's pull the curtain back on something uncomfortable. Gen Z's financial struggles are not accidental. They are, in many ways, profitable. Student loan servicers collect interest on $1.838 trillion in debt, generating billions in annual revenue from the financial decisions 18-year-olds were pressured to make before they understood compound interest. The rental housing market has swelled to a record 46 million renting households in America. Institutional investors, large corporations, and real estate investment trusts have purchased single-family homes at scale, reducing the inventory available to first-time buyers and keeping rental demand and rental prices elevated. The buy now, pay later industry, worth billions, specifically targets younger consumers with low upfront costs that mask their true financial burden. Gen Z is their fastest-growing customer segment. And perhaps most invisibly, the financial anxiety industry itself. Courses, apps, influencers, and platforms that monetize Gen Z's desperate search for financial answers, often selling the hope of a solution while profiting from the problem staying unsolved. This generation is not just financially exhausted, they are the most lucrative generation of financially anxious consumers in American history, and the systems creating that anxiety are the same systems benefiting from it. Meet Marcus and Destiny, both 24, best friends since college. Both graduated from the same state university in the same year. Marcus followed the conventional path exactly as designed. Business degree, $52,000 starting salary at a marketing firm in Dallas. He's paying $480 a month in student loans, $1,450 in rent, has a car payment, and is contributing the minimum to his 401k to get the employer match. After all fixed expenses, Marcus has roughly $280 left over per month. He's not going out every weekend. He's not buying designer clothes. He made coffee at home this morning. He did everything right. He cannot save meaningfully. He cannot build toward a down payment. He cannot absorb an unexpected expense without putting it on a credit card. Marcus is exhausted in a way that is very hard to explain to his parents, who bought their first house at 28 on a single teacher's salary. Destiny took a different path. She avoided a traditional 4-year degree and instead completed a 2-year coding boot camp, $12,000, which she paid off in 18 months. She got a remote job as a junior developer at 21. She's not rich, but her student debt was a fraction of Marcus's. She worked remotely and moved to a lower cost of living city in Tennessee. Her housing costs are $950 a month. She's been investing $400 a month in an index fund for 3 years. At 24, Destiny has $19,000 in investments and no credit card debt. Marcus didn't fail. The path he followed just costs more and returns less than it did for the generation that designed it. Destiny didn't win the lottery. She found a different path, and she started on it before the debt could compound against her. 3 numbers from 2025 and 2026 that reframe everything. Fact 1. According to Deloitte's 2025 survey of 23,000 workers, Gen Z financial insecurity jumped from 30% to 48% in a single year, a 60% increase in 12 months. To put that in context, that's one of the sharpest single-year increases in financial insecurity ever recorded for any generation. It didn't accumulate slowly, it accelerated suddenly, and experts say the conditions driving it haven't improved. Fact 2. Gen Z represents more than 20% of the U.S. population, but only 3% of home buyers. Meanwhile, baby boomers own their homes at a 79.6% rate. The wealth gap between the oldest and youngest American generations, specifically in housing equity, the single largest source of middle-class wealth for the last 60 years, is now wider than at any point in modern U.S. history. And fact 3. Only 6% of Gen Z workers say they want leadership roles in their careers. 6%. Compare that to the career ambition surveys of millennials at the same age. This isn't apathy. This is a generation that watched people work themselves into the ground climbing a corporate ladder and concluded that the ladder no longer leads anywhere worth climbing. They're not checking out of ambition. They're redefining what ambition means when the old definition doesn't deliver. So, let's land this with honesty. Gen Z is financially exhausted because they entered adulthood during a perfect storm, a pandemic, a fake recovery, an inflation surge, an AI-driven job market disruption, and a housing market so disconnected from wages that homeownership for most young Americans now requires either extraordinary luck or extraordinary sacrifice. They carry more debt than any previous generation. They face higher costs. They have fewer stable jobs to grow into. And they are doing it while being told by people who entered adulthood in a completely different era that they just need to work harder and spend less. But here's what I also want to say clearly because it matters. Gen Z is not defeated. They are adapting, and some of the adaptations are genuinely smart. 3 things that are working for the Gen Z members who are getting ahead. 1. Rejecting the credential trap. The Marcus and Destiny example is real. The people winning financially in Gen Z are increasingly the ones who looked at the cost-to-return ratio of traditional education and chose cheaper, faster, more targeted skill pathways, trade programs, coding boot camps, certifications, and early entry into the workforce before debt could compound. 2. Choosing geography deliberately. The single most powerful financial decision a young American can make right now is where they live. Moving from an $1,800 per month city to an $800 per month city on the same remote income can generate more wealth than a $15,000 raise. Gen Z, more than any previous generation, is making this choice. They are moving to smaller cities, lower-cost states, and building financial buffers that simply aren't possible on the coasts. 3. Treating investments as non-negotiable, not optional. The Gen Z members who started investing even $50 a month into a basic index fund at 21 or 22 are going to look dramatically different financially by 35 than the ones who waited until they felt ready. Time in the market is the one variable you can control, and it's the one you can never get back. The system was not designed for this generation, that's true. But this generation is smarter, more resourceful, and more financially literate than the one before them, and the ones who channel that awareness into action instead of despair are writing a different story. You are in this video. You are already ahead of the people who never asked the question. What you do with this next is yours. But before you go, there's something I want to leave you with. Everything we talked about today is the current picture. The student debt, the housing market, the job is frozen, the AI disruption. Now, here's the question that keeps economists, policy researchers, and financial analysts awake at night. What happens to an economy when an entire generation can't build wealth? When they can't buy homes, the housing market stagnates. When they carry debt for decades, they don't start businesses. When they live paycheck to paycheck, they don't invest. When they don't invest, the wealth that compounds for the top keeps compounding, and the gap between the people who inherited a head start and the people who didn't get permanently, structurally wider. There are economists right now arguing that what's happening to Gen Z financially isn't just a generational inconvenience, it's the early signal of something that will reshape the American economy for the next 40 years. And the decisions young Americans make in the next 5 years about debt, about housing, about income, about investing could be the difference between riding that wave and being buried by it. That story, what's actually coming, and what the people who will be okay are doing right now, that's what we're covering next. Subscribe, turn on notifications. This one matters more than most. If this video puts language around something you've been feeling but couldn't explain, share it. Send it to a friend who's been beating themselves up about their finances. Send it to a parent who doesn't quite understand why their kid seems stuck. Hit like if this changed something in how you see what's happening, and drop your answer in the comments. How old are you, and what's the single biggest financial barrier you're dealing with right now? No judgment here, just real answers. I read them all. See you in the next one.